One of the things that I like to do is get a little bit closer, so I'm not going to do the podium, if that's okay. I hope I don't mess up anything, but I am so excited to be here. Most of my job now ends up dealing with grown folks, so it's a real nice change today to actually be with people that I respect the most, and that's the voices of our kids. Thank you so much for that introduction. I do want to share one thing with you, just to give you a perspective of where I come from in terms of this job. Sometimes it's looked at as this position, but I look at my job as number one, being the voice for you as students in the state of Alabama, and then today as future educators. Let me tell you why it's so important that the voice of students is at the table. One of the jobs I had a long time ago, in the middle of my career, was I had to start an inner city alternative school, not too far from Parker, in inner city Birmingham. Back in the day when those kids, nobody wanted those kids to go to school with these kids. And the kids that nobody really cared for anymore, they kind of put them out by themselves in a place by themselves and said, go do something with them. Nobody really cared. So I ended up with 36 kids that had been expelled from school, had been through the juvenile system, had been through everything you could think of, and me and the 36 of them started this journey together. And I could go through a lot of things about that journey that weren't all real positive, but they all turned out positive. Because what I learned from those 36 young men in inner city Birmingham was far more valuable than any degree I ever got, because what they told me was, if you give kids a chance, and you put adults in front of kids that may not have all the nice things about them that we might want, but they all have the potential to be successful, and that's what we need from teachers of the future. Every child counts, and every child's voice counts, and we don't always know when kids come to school what they bring with them. What I learned from those 36 young men was none of the 36 of them, when they left school in the afternoon, knew where they were going to sleep that night. They had no assurance of a place to go. They shared with me that when they left in the afternoon on Friday, they weren't assured of what they would have to eat until they showed back up on Monday. They shared with me that they didn't have caring adults in their life anymore that wanted to make sure they went to school. And that it wasn't cool to be smart as a young black man in inner city Birmingham and to go to school. And they said, if you can help us with those sorts of things, then we might actually be interested in math and science and social studies and English. So I share that to say that as potential teachers for the future, not only do we need you to teach academics, we need champions for kids. We need people that can take time to get to know the kids that you're going to be asked to teach. For the teachers in the room that have heard me speak at the beginning of school years, I go and speak at back-to-school meetings of teachers. I say this in every meeting that I conduct. I don't care if you teach a thing the first week of school. Take the time to get to know your kids. Because once you get to know your kids and they know you really care about them, they'll do just about anything you ask them to do. But if you lead with, here's your homework, and if you don't get it right, you get a 0, you will have 180 days of not real pleasurable experience, I can assure you. So it's a great opportunity, and I want to give you some encouragement. There's about to be a huge retirement in public education. A lot of people are reaching retirement age, not only in education, but in all professions. So there's about to be a great need for great, young, believing teachers in our schools in Alabama. Just to put it in perspective, there's 740,000 of you that go to school every day in public education in Alabama. 740,000 moving parts every day. 1,500 schools, 136 school systems. Right now we have over 45,000 teachers and administrators. So there's room for you. There's a place for you as we move into the future. What we need are teachers that are ready to do something different. Something different than might have been done previously. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is where we're headed in public education that I hope will excite you about what your future might look like. Let me ask you a few questions before we get started, just to get you thinking about what school could look like with you as the young leaders of public education. Where does it say that school has to happen in a certain place at a certain time? Where does it say that in law? Where does it say that school has to happen between 7:30 and 3:30 every day? Where does it say that school has to happen Monday through Friday? Where does it say that school has to happen between August and the end of May? Where does it say any of those things? It doesn't. But we continue to do school the way we've always done school. We've got breakaway schools now that are doing unbelievable sorts of things, which is exactly why we need thinkers like you to become our next generation of teachers, because we have kids now that are more diverse than they've ever been before. But regretfully, we continue to try to educate them through an industrial model that's based on birthdays, and we put them through school in batches based on when they were born and spit them out 13 years later. And now we have an opportunity to do that differently. It's exciting, guys. I want to share a little bit about that today. What we did 3 years ago is we recalibrated what public education is all about. It's not about passing the Alabama High School graduation exam, which thank goodness we don't give anymore. It's about preparing kids for what comes next. And those two things didn't have anything in common. We had huge numbers of you passing the graduation exam, but that didn't mean you were prepared for what comes next. What we did in the first 3 months of the new administration of public education, we went out and talked to the people who get you when you graduate from high school. We spent about 3 months talking to business and industry. We spent about 3 months going to every community college. We went to every four-year university and talked to the faculties and said, what is it about the kids that are leaving Alabama high schools today that's missing when you get them? We spent 3 months gathering all that information. That's the only question we asked them. And at the end of the day, we put all that information together, and one major theme emerged at the top. And they very clearly told us the kids that were graduating from Alabama high schools lacked intellectual curiosity. And if you don't leave with anything else today, as a young new teacher, that's your job as a teacher, to instill in your students intellectual curiosity. Let me go back and tell you why we were producing kids without intellectual curiosity. And you've lived through this. And on behalf of every educator that's been forced to do this, I apologize to you. But we have been preparing you for over 10 years to take a test rather than preparing you to think. Because that's what No Child Left Behind made us do. Every teacher that's represented in this room wanted to do something different, I can assure you. But we knew at the end of the day, people across the state and this nation were going to judge us based on how you did on some ridiculous test that we're going to give you in the spring. And now we've shifted that. We'll always have to give tests, but it's how we use those tests that are important. What we need to begin to do is not just make sure you can regurgitate some information, but make sure you know what to do with it. So that we can push you to think differently, to challenge us on what we do, be able to defend what your thoughts are. There's no stronger voice in public education than the voice of students. But we've restricted your voice to only bubbling in an answer on a test. And we've got to change that, and we've done that now with Plan 2020. It's causing a lot of disruption across the state of Alabama, and I don't apologize for that. I like to stir stuff up, because when you stir stuff up, things change. And if you stir it up on behalf of children, regardless of the politics around it, good things happen. So let me share with you just a couple of things. This is what your job now is, and your chief teacher's job now is, to be a successful graduate in the state of Alabama. You will not see anything up there about a test. What you will see are two skill sets, both just as important as the other. The first one is, as a teacher, your job is to make sure that when kids leave high school, and this is just as important for the pre-kindergarten and kindergarten teacher it is for the high school teacher, that they possess the knowledge and skills to be able to go into entry-level credit-bearing classes and wherever they go without the need for remediation. Why in the world should 34% of the kids that have been leaving Alabama high schools be enrolled in remedial classes in 2-year and 4-year colleges when we just gave them a diploma saying they were ready? It's because what we were preparing you for was a test, not your future. So that's the new stake in the ground about where we're headed with how we're preparing students in Alabama. But the big shift is on the right side of the slide. This is what we've got to really focus on. And once you have that content knowledge, that you possess the ability to apply it to real-world situations through collaboration with your peers and problem solving and critically thinking, and be able to defend your decision in writing or verbally, and a desire to continue to learn. And you know what our biggest challenge in getting you to do that is? The adults in the room. Because most of us, my age and close, were prepared to be a teacher doing exactly what I'm doing to you today. That I'm the disseminator of information, and you're to sit there and take it, and at some point you're to regurgitate it. That model has to change if we want kids to do the right side of the slide. So I'm going to give you some examples of some things that are happening in this state right now that I hope this is some of the most exciting stuff I've ever seen. Our challenge, and one that you hopefully won't have to fight, is how we redefine preparedness and success, and whether we continue to have school like the picture on your left, or have school like the picture on your right. I'm going to talk about those for a minute. The one on your left looks like a traditional classroom. I was in a school recently, one of these breakaway schools that are doing what's right for kids. They sold every desk in their school building at B.B. Comer High School. There's not a desk to be found in that school. And they did it because they knew if they continued to have desks, they wouldn't end up doing the things that we needed to do. So now they have round tables in their classrooms, and kids sit in collaborative groups, and the teacher presents a real-world problem to the group where they apply their math and science and English and social studies and career and technical education to solving a problem. And the teacher's role, your role, is to go from group to group, challenge what they're doing, ask questions about what they're doing, ask probing questions. When you see a novel idea, ask them to stand up and share it with their group. The teacher's role totally changes when we're preparing kids to think and interact and solve problems. And at B.B. Comer High School, a very interesting thing happened that they didn't expect to happen when they moved to this new environment. 50% of the faculty left. 50% of the faculty left because they weren't willing to make the shift to teach kids in a different way. And that's why I'm telling you folks, there's a lot of room for you out there. And I tell our principals and our administrators, and I don't mean this anything negative toward our teachers, but if we have teachers that aren't willing to teach kids in the 21st century learning environment, we need to leave the exits open so they have a way to get out quickly, so we can get you into those classrooms so you can do the work we need to do. Because we don't have a group of kids that can wait for another generation to step in. Because when that happens, the picture on the right occurs. This is one of the most encouraging things I've seen recently, but probably the biggest burden that I'm carrying. But I hope it excites you. This is in a classroom, and just so you'll put this in context, every week since I became state superintendent 3 years ago, some day during the week, I leave Montgomery and go visit a school somewhere in the state of Alabama. I don't call and say I'm coming, because if I call and say I'm coming, they'll put something on the marquee out front, and they'll shut down the library, and they'll have muffins and orange juice and coffee, and do all this mess that you don't normally do on a regular day. So I don't call anybody and say I'm coming. I don't do it because I'm coming to get you. It's not that at all. I just want to be around kids and teachers and see what's happening in schools. And I get there early in the morning, I help unload buses, I sign in at the office like I'm supposed to, and then I spend the morning in a classroom of somebody's choosing, I don't care, just put me in one. And then I have lunch with the kids in the lunchroom at the kids' table when you really find out what's going on in school. When you really get the truth. But anyway, this is one of the classes I visited. This is a 5th grade classroom in rural Mobile County where 90% of the kids are on free lunch. They're all rural. They have all the demographics that say they shouldn't be smart because they've got all those things working against them. I walked in this 5th grade classroom unannounced and finally had to go over to the little boy in the orange shirt and say, "What are you doing?" And he stopped for a minute and he said, "Oh, yes, sir, we're creating code." I went, "Well, what is code?" He said, "Well, it's really computer science, but our teacher has told us not to use that term with adults because it's kind of intimidating. But all it really is math, it's fun." I said, "Great. So explain to me a little bit more about this coding. What are you going to do with this coding?" And you can't see it, but there's a little hand up there on the right on this thing that is a robot. Now, he said, "Our job is to create code to program our robots," that they had reached out to their community build these robots. Our job is to create the computer code to program these robots and you also can't see this in the picture, they moved all the furniture out of the room and they partnered with their career tech folks at the high school to come create a cityscape in their classroom that had buildings and streets and roads, construction zones and detours and all the things you find in the city. So these poor rural fifth graders were creating the computer code to program their robots to traverse a cityscape. And I sat there for 2.5 hours with these kids and learned with them, because I had no clue what coding was. I learned with them, and at the end of that period, watched 8 little robots be turned loose individually, and without exception, every one of them traversed that cityscape and came back to the beginning. Every one of them. It told me 2 things. If we don't tell children that are poor and rural that they're not smart enough, they can do anything we ask them to do. Do you know what the key variable in this was? Do you know what the thing that made the difference in this classroom was? Was the teacher. The teacher made the decision that she, in this case, was willing to be vulnerable enough to say to her children, guys, I don't understand how to do all this either, but I'm not going to let my lack of understanding stand in the way of what I know you can do. So we're going to pull in some help and we're going to learn together. And as a result, 5th graders at Castle Elementary School now can do computer coding and program robots to traverse a cityscape. That should excite you. That's why we need young, bright, new teachers that are willing to not feel like they have to be the disseminator of all information, but to be the facilitator of learning and be willing to be brave and vulnerable enough to say, I can't know it all in this 21st century environment, but I can sure know where to go find it and collaborate and never allow children to be held back by what you don't know and feel like that's okay. That's okay. That's one of the most encouraging things I've seen, but it's also a great burden because it tells us this new venture we have to do as teachers. How are we going to get there? How do we get to this new place? One of the things we've done is we've adopted new standards in math and English language arts. And there's been a lot of controversy. Hopefully you have been not aware of the controversy, but it's all political about our standards that say we're trying to infiltrate your mind with some communist whatever, which is not the truth. We're basically trying to make you think, which doesn't scare me. It does scare some people because, my goodness, what if we taught all people to think on their own so political parties couldn't tell them what to think? What a novel idea. Anyway, our new standards do 2 things. They still require you to understand math and English language arts and reading, but it asks you to do something with it. It asks you to take it and apply it to something. One of the most exciting 3rd grade classrooms I was in recently, this is 3rd grade, they were teaching 3-digit addition. Telling kids to add 3-digit additions, this is what you have to do. That's the way we used to teach math, and then I know my hand-style folks are here. They would never let us stop there, but in a lot of classrooms, once you taught them to teach 3rd, I know y'all never done this in any of the schools represented here. Definitely not over here in Barstow. But y'all powered it will. But in some schools in the state of Alabama, in 3rd grade, we give you about 25 3-digit addition problems and ask you to sit in the room and do it like a teacher set up behind the computer doing. We don't really know what. I know not in Barstow. And then we give you about 50 more to take home with you that you take home to do on a worksheet. Like in my house with 3 boys would like to do worksheets, so they do about 10 of the problems, and we finish the rest of them so they get credit for their homework. I know none of y'all have done that either. I know y'all did. But what we do now, all you knew when you did that sort of stuff is that they and their parents could possibly do some work, some problems, 3-digit addition. So we still ask you to do that, but then we ask you something else. After you've done it, we'd say, okay, based on the mathematics we've been working on this week, take this real world problem, and the 3 of you determine the mathematics that's required to solve it. Come up with as many potential solutions to it that you can. Determine the one that best answers the question, and then explain to the rest of your class how you came up with that solution. That's when you understand mathematics. You can now apply it and understand it. And I was at a high school recently, Winterboro High School. It said, since our teachers have been teaching us math this new way, when we used to get to a question on the ACT, if we hadn't learned to solve it in the specific way they had taught us, we just skipped the problem. But now that we know how to problem solve and think critically, we can figure out how to get to the answer now because we understand that now. If I had to retire today, I'd be happy. If we made that shift in the way we're getting kids to think. That's your job as a teacher. Is not just to teach content, is to think and apply what they learn to great situations. Let me give you another thing. It's so exciting. And this is a total shift for public education. You probably don't even you're not aware of this. I hope you're not. But the way we judged your teachers in your schools in the past was on that dadgum Alabama high school graduation exam. How many people passed it or not, or on the horn or whatever. It's just a snapshot of one day in the whole life of your learner, which was just wrong. And regretfully, only the people who scored at the very highest were considered successful. Only the people who highest. We've talked to business and industry, we've talked to our folks here at Athens, we've talked to our community colleges. We need people to be considered successful at all sorts of levels. So what we've done is we are working and have now implemented a whole new way to judge success. And here are 6 of the ways we can judge success. You could be considered a successful high school graduate if you met one of the benchmarks on the ACT. You could also be considered a successful high school graduate if you have a qualifying score on an AP or IB exam. Or you could be considered a successful high school graduate if you have transcripted college credit while you're still in high school. Through dual enrollment, early college, any way you want to do that, summer learning. You could be considered a successful graduate if you have a benchmark level on ACT work keys, silver level or up. You could be considered a successful high school graduate if you have an approved industry credential from a career technical program that is industry recognized. Or you can be considered a successful high school graduate if you successfully enlisted in the military. Why shouldn't all 6 of those be considered equal? Let me give you an example of why this has stuck with me. I had the chance to visit Finland 3-4 years ago to study their education system because they get ranked as #1 in everything. And what part of our time there in Finland was sharing what we do in the United States versus what they do in Finland. And I brought up the concept of valedictorian. And they looked at me as if I had a horn growing out of my head. They didn't have any idea what the term valedictorian meant. And I began to explain to them the concept of valedictorian, and they were appalled. They were appalled that we would have something like valedictorian. And this is no offense to anybody in the room that may be a valedictorian. I was not. I was a well-rounded student. But this is their concept of what I shared with them. If in a class of 200, you have 1 winner and 199 losers. And the way we have crafted education is only those who score the highest and get the most were the best. We need to make sure that the valedictorian and the person who enlists in the military and the person who has a welding certificate and walks out the door and gets a job making $60,000 a year are all considered equal and equally as successful, because we need every child to be considered in this big spectrum of what the world has to offer. Everybody doesn't have to have a PhD in chemistry to be considered successful. So we've built an accountability system now that has multiple ways for kids to be considered successful, which will begin to change the dynamic of what education looks like. Let me share just a couple of other things with you. Investing in our people. Investing in you. Our biggest investment in public education, 80 to 90% of Dick Wilson's budget, of the budget of every public education system in this state, is in people, is in teachers and support staff. But regretfully, our legislature over the last 6 years has put 0 money into the state budget for professional development, for library enhancement, for technology, or whatever it is teachers need to do their work. And that is regretful because we're giving 0 support to the one variable that the research says is the only variable that can move children from point A to point B. And that is an effectively prepared, resourced, and supported classroom teacher. I'm going to tell you this, and people who sell stuff in education don't like being in conferences because I just call it like it is. You can go out and buy every program somebody has to offer. You can buy every piece of technology. You can buy everything of the bells and whistles somebody will try to sell to you to say, if you buy this and implement it, it will change student learning. That is not true. The only variable the research tells us will move kids from point A to point B is an effectively prepared and resourced classroom teacher. Now, all those things in the hands of a person like that can make a big difference. And that's why one of our major areas of focus right now are our colleges of education. Our programs that prepare teachers, because many of them, not Athens State obviously, but many of them are still preparing teachers like they prepared them 30 years ago. We have to get those programs to shift so they're preparing you to do what I've described to you today, of being this facilitator of learning, which is a very different way. So we're excited about where we're going to move in trying to ensure that that happens. So let me leave you with a couple of things. I've got 3 minutes. I want you to imagine a couple of things. Imagine your future as a teacher and a potential leader of public education in this state. Imagine school as an experience not restricted by place and time. Why does all learning have to occur in this place we call school? Can learning not occur in lots of different places? Can learning not occur in the community? Can learning not occur at the farm? Can learning not occur here, there, and everywhere? People get real nervous when I go down this road, but I challenged somebody recently that was about to spend $70 million to build a new high school. And I said, why in the world are you spending $70 million to build this mega building that's going to look just like every mega building we've built before, when you could take that $70 million and create learning experiences for kids all over the community? That's different, and that's hard for people to conceptualize. Imagine a policy environment that encourages innovation and creativity and allows safe space for risk and failure. Your teachers in this room will tell you that under our old accountability system, they didn't have room to be creative and innovative. They had to get through the stuff so we could take the daggone test. One of the things I learned from business and industry when I met with them is there's not a successful business in this state that does not build into their business plan risk and loss. Because when you build in risk and loss, you build in a place for creativity and innovation to occur. And that's the policy environment we're building for you guys as future teachers. So you're not constricted and so worried about the test. It will only be one piece of the puzzle. But it gives you the opportunity to take a learning opportunity and expand it into whatever you need to do. And some of the best learning, and this is hard for us to say because we've been so driven by the test, is some of the best learning happens when we make mistakes. In science and math especially. The whole concept of science is experimentation. And through the experimentation you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. As a classroom teacher, when I would teach mathematics to my special ed kids, some of the best learning that ever occurred was when I thought I taught something and I assessed them and realized very quickly, obviously that didn't go well. And rather than just putting that in the grade book and moving on, we stop and we figure out what I didn't do well and explain well what they didn't understand. And as a result of it, everybody learned in the process, including myself. If you're ever to teach a subject that's cumulative like mathematics, you can't skip content because it may be the very thing that impacts them for the rest of their mathematics life if you skip over things they don't understand. So that sort of environment, a culture where teachers create thinkers and creators without fear of one test being the determinant of that. Every kid with a pathway. One of the things we've also recently done is we've done away with all the diploma options we used to have, where we would parcel you out into pieces between 8th and 9th grade, which is insane. I mean, why in the world would we make a decision about anybody going from 8th grade to 9th grade? I was a high school principal. 8th graders are crazy. You don't need to make decisions about 8th graders when they're going to 9th grade because I've had a bunch of 10th graders today and you teachers in the room know exactly what I'm talking about. When they come back as 10th graders, because 9th graders are usually kind of crazy too. When they come back as 10th graders, you have to have a conversation with them. They kind of grew a brain. They're rational people. So why in the world were we making decisions about kids between 8th and 9th grade when they change and they start thinking differently? So now we give you wide open different ways to get to the same. And the final one is, and this is a real disruptive one. High school principals are likely to share this one. is a learning environment where learning is the constant and time is the variable. Knowing that's going to be disruptive. They did this at Oxford City Schools this year. Every school system has permission to do this. And I'm not saying you rush in and do it tomorrow because it's disruptive. But on the first day of school at Oxford High School, they gave their comprehensive final exam in, let's say, Algebra 1. And if you're my Algebra 1 class, and all 5 of you aced my Algebra 1 final, the comprehensive final that I was going to give you 36 weeks later, why in the world should you have to wait 36 weeks to get credit in Algebra 1? You get it on the first day of school, and we change your schedule and put you into geometry or something else. They did that at Oxford High School. You know why we're not doing that across the state? Why are we not doing that across the state? Those of you who work in high schools, what drives the high school? The students or the master schedule? The master schedule. And until we're willing to rearrange the adults the first 2 weeks of school along with the kids, we'll continue to do exactly what we've been doing. Because the reality is, at Benjamin Russell High School, where I was principal, Walter Gowan had had fourth block planning for the last 25 years. And even though I needed Walter Gowan to teach something fourth block based on what we just said, I didn't want to hear him complain for the next 35 weeks. So we didn't do it. But I'm here to say, when we start rearranging the adults to meet the needs of the children, it's amazing what we can do. So at the end of the day, the question that I'm asking those is, why are we doing this? Why are you invoking all of these changes? Why are you disrupting public education? Why are you changing our roles? Why are we doing this? We're doing it because of Sam. Sam is a kid I met on one of my drop-in visits, unannounced, at a school in Huntsville. Sam's in pre-K, 4-year-old pre-K. And I go over to Sam, I got engaged with Sam and asked him what he's doing. And he was real proud. He had his tablet, he was working with the letter B, and he explained to me about the letter B, told me a bunch of words and started with the letter B. And then I said, well, Sam, if you're on the letter B, then obviously you must have done the letters that came before the letter B. He said, oh, yes, sir, I have an archive here on my tablet. Would you like me to pull them up? We laughed. I want you to think about that for a minute. Sam is in 4-year-old pre-K working on the letter B, and when asked about his prior learning, he told me that he could pull them up because he had them archived on his tablet. What that tells me is Sam's not expecting to move into kindergarten and be coloring in arbitrary maps of the United States, or, gluing cotton balls on bunny butts in April because that's what he's doing in kindergarten. He's going to be expected to be learning something that challenges his learning. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. Guys, that's your role. Is to come into this profession of education and take Sam as far as Sam can possibly go. Realizing that Sam's path and Sam's buddy's path may look different. Sam may finish before his buddy or after, and that's okay. In Piedmont City Schools, just this past week, kids aren't restricted by the grade they're in. They're learning by the standards. And if they finish the standards for third grade math by March, they move into fourth grade math. Nobody's restricted by age and place. It can happen, but it can only happen if teachers rethink what learning looks like. And learning does not apply to 740,000 kids on day 1 and day 180 as if they're all the same. It cannot work that way if we want all kids to succeed. So what I would leave with you today is the future is awfully bright. There's a lot of change that has occurred that should give you the opportunity to be the most innovative, creative generation of teachers we've ever seen. And we need you. We need thinkers and leaders to come into our classrooms that believe in kids, regardless of what they bring to the table, and are willing to say, let's do this together. This is not a process that's done like I've done to you today. It's a collaborative effort between you and your students and their parents and the community. It's a whole new way to do education. I could not be more encouraged. After a week of dealing with the Alabama legislature, which is what I do Tuesday through Thursday, to end up Friday with a group of potential future educators could not be a better place to be on Friday morning, let me tell you. I am encouraged this number of students here that want to be teachers, and I hope what you've heard today will encourage you to stay the course. Stay the course, and we'll see you in 4 years, or 5 years,